She was on the ground in the rain with two 3-month-old babies pressed against her body and a bullet in her back, and she still would not let go. Ruby Jackson did everything alone. The pregnancy, the birth, the sleepless months, the silence. Nobody knew the father. She made sure of that. But someone decided she had seen too much, and now she was bleeding out on a street in Daegu with her infants crying in her arms. The man who stopped to save her was the same man from that one destroyed night. And he had kept her necklace. Subscribe, like, and drop a comment below. You are not ready for this one. Her knees hit the pavement first. She didn't feel it immediately. The body does that, delays the accounting. But she felt her arms lock, felt every muscle in her upper body contract with a force that had nothing to do with thought and everything to do with the two small lives pressed against her chest. Jin was wrapped tight in the fabric carrier at her front, 3 months old, his face tucked against her collarbone. Miran she had been cradling in her right arm, held against her side the way Ruby had learned to hold her over 12 weeks of carrying 2 infants at once while doing everything else the world required. When the shot came, Ruby had twisted. Her back to the road, her body curved forward, everything in her angled over them. She went down on her knees, then her side, and she kept her arms locked. The rain was heavy. It had been heavy since 5 in the afternoon, and it showed no sign of considering anyone's circumstances. It hit the pavement around her and soaked through her jacket and ran cold along the side of her face where it pressed against the ground. Jin had startled at the sound and was crying now, the high, bewildered cry of an infant who does not understand what has happened but understands that something has. Miran was silent. That silence was worse. Ruby pressed her palm flat against Miran's back and felt the movement there, breathing, alive, and closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she opened them. The vehicle was gone. She had registered it slowing beside her on the empty street and thought nothing of it. Because she was tired, and it was raining, and she was carrying her children home the way she did every Tuesday night after her shift, and she had not been looking for threats. She had been thinking about whether there was enough rice in the apartment, and whether Miran's evening feeding was going to be difficult again, and whether she could afford to call her mother this weekend, or whether the international rate would have to wait another week. She had not been looking for threats. She pressed her hand to her lower back now and felt the wet heat there, thick against her fingers, and her mind produced the information quietly, without drama. She was bleeding. Significantly. The burning had been building since she hit the ground, and she had been setting it aside with the same disciplined efficiency she used to set aside everything that could not be addressed in the immediate moment. But now she allowed herself to assess it properly. She needed help. She could not stand. She had tried once and her legs had not cooperated in the way she required. The street was empty. Her phone was in her bag, and her bag had come off her shoulder when she fell and was somewhere behind her on the pavement, and reaching it would mean putting Miran down, which she was not going to do. Okay, Ruby said out loud. Not to the twins. To herself. She did that when she needed to stay inside her own head. Okay, think. Jin's crying was getting louder. She adjusted the carrier with one hand, pressing him closer, and he quieted fractionally. Miran had still not made a sound, and Ruby checked her again, palm flat on her small back, and again felt the rise and fall, and exhaled. She heard the vehicles before she saw the lights. Multiple engines, moving at speed, then slowing. She pressed herself tighter over the twins and waited, because she had no other option, and she had never been a woman who wasted energy on responses she couldn't sustain. The lights swept over her. Doors opened. Footsteps on wet pavement. Several people, moving with the coordinated efficiency of people who did this regularly. She heard Korean, low and fast, words she caught fragments of. Get the doctor, call ahead, now. Then one pair of footsteps separated from the others and came directly to her. Don't touch them, Ruby said. She hadn't planned to say it. It came out before anything else, flat and final. The footsteps stopped. A pause. Then the man crouched down in front of her, and she made herself look up and found his face in the headlight wash. Dark eyes, sharp jaw, the absolute stillness of someone who had trained themselves out of visible reaction, and she understood from the way the other men had arranged themselves that he was the one they deferred to. Your children are not hurt, he said. In Korean first, then in English when he registered her expression. His English was careful, precise. I can see they are breathing. You are injured. I know I'm injured, Ruby said. Then you know you need a doctor. I know a lot of things, she said. I don't know you. Something moved briefly through his expression. Not amusement exactly. Closer to recognition of a quality he respected. No, he said. You don't. But the people who shot at you may come back, and you cannot stand, and your children need shelter. So I am asking you to let my people help. Ruby looked at him. She was 25 years old, and she had been making her own decisions since before that felt comfortable, and every instinct she had about accepting help from powerful male strangers in foreign countries said no, said not this, said get up and find another way. But her legs weren't working, and the rain was getting heavier, and Jian was crying, and she could feel the blood leaving her body with a patience that frightened her more than the pain did. My children don't leave my sight, she said. Agreed. I want to know where we're going before we get in any vehicle. Private medical facility. 40 minutes. If anything happens to them. Nothing will happen to them, he said. And he said it the way people say things when they are not making a promise, but stating a fact about what they intend to ensure. Ruby looked at him for 3 more seconds. Then she said, help me up. He didn't hand her off to one of the other men. He leaned forward himself and got one arm beneath her and lifted with the controlled strength of someone who did not perform effort. And Ruby kept Miran locked against her chest through all of it. And when she was on her feet and her vision went wide at the edges, he held her steady without being asked. The baby at your front, he said quietly. Let someone carry her, so I can support you. Him, Ruby said. Jian. Let someone carry Jian. She looked past his shoulder at the men arranged behind him and found the one who had moved closest, a younger man with alert eyes and careful hands. He had his arms slightly open, not reaching, just available. Jian went to him without protest, which under any other circumstances would have been the most surprising thing to happen all night. Ruby transferred Miran to her other arm and let Hajun walk her to the vehicle, and she did not look back, because looking back would cost her something she couldn't afford to spend. The facility was private in the way that money makes things private. No signage, staff who moved without urgency or noise, rooms that were clean and quiet, and contained equipment that had no business being this far off any official grid. Ruby was on a table within 10 minutes of arriving. She could hear the twins in the adjacent room, hear the sound of a nurse speaking in the low, rhythmic tone that experienced medical staff used with frightened infants. She grabbed the arm of the doctor who was preparing her for surgery. Those are my children in that room, she said. Someone stays with them. Someone I can call out to. Understood, the doctor said. He was compact, middle-aged, the kind of man whose face revealed nothing, but whose movements were precise and unhurried. What are their names? Jian and Miran. How old? 3 months. He nodded, turned, gave instructions to someone behind him, and turned back. There will be a nurse with them at all times. You have my word. Your word means nothing to me, Ruby said. I don't know you either. He looked at her for a moment. Then let the proximity of that door mean something, he said. You'll be able to hear them the entire time. She let go of his arm. She went under still listening. She came back in pieces. The ceiling first. White tiles, clean. Then the weight of the 4 in her arm and the specific heavy quiet of a room where someone had made a deliberate effort to minimize sound. Then the absence of weight at her chest, the place where Jian lived during her evenings, and her hand was already moving before her eyes were fully open. They're here. The voice came from her right. She turned. He was seated in the chair beside her bed with the posture of a man who had been there for a while and had no intention of performing discomfort about it. He had changed his jacket. His hands were folded in his lap, and he was watching her with that same complete, unhurried attention she had registered on the road. Jian is in the corner, he said. Asleep. Miran is with the nurse. She has been fed. Ruby turned her head and found them. The nurse was in the chair by the window with Miran against her shoulder, one hand moving in slow circles on the baby's back. Jian was in a padded infant seat, his small fists curled, his chest rising and falling. The thin strip of light from the window caught the edge of his face, and Ruby looked at it with the particular sustained attention she reserved for things she needed to memorize. She exhaled. Thank you, she said. To the room. To no one specifically. You're welcome, the man said. Ruby looked at him. You stayed. Yes. Why? Because I want to understand what happened on that road. Someone shot at me, Ruby said. That is what happened. Who? I don't know. Any idea why? She thought about it. Actually considered it rather than dismissing the question. No, she said, and it was honest. She had been going over it since she hit the pavement, and she could not find a clean answer. She served hotel guests. She minded her business. She had no enemies she knew of, no involvement in anything that warranted a vehicle and a gun on a Tuesday night in the rain. "What's your name?" she said. "Hajun." She waited for more. Nothing more came. "Ruby Jackson," she said. "Since we're doing this." Something happened in his face. Small and fast, and she almost missed it. His eyes moved to her necklace, the silver chain at her throat, thin, with a small flat pendant, and stayed there for a beat too long, and then came back to her face with a quality she couldn't immediately name. "You're looking at my necklace," she said. He didn't apologize for it. "It's familiar." "Familiar how?" "I'm not certain," he said, and the way he said it made her understand that uncertainty was something he encountered rarely and found disagreeable. "How long have you had it?" "Long time," Ruby said carefully. "Since I was about 19. He nodded once and said nothing further, and she let it rest there, because she was post-surgery and exhausted, and the full shape of what that exchange might mean was something she would need energy to stand inside. She did not have that energy yet. She had come to Daegu 3 years ago with a work visa, a contact number for a hotel HR coordinator, and a suitcase that was heavy because she had packed for every possible version of what the next 2 years might look like. She was methodical like that. She had been methodical since she was a child, helping her mother organize the market stall on weekends, learning early that the difference between managing and not managing was almost always preparation. The Grand Lux was exactly what its name suggested, the kind of hotel where the lobby flowers were changed every 2 days, and the thread count in every room was a number that meant nothing to most people, but represented a philosophy of expense. Ruby worked room service, which meant she was in the rooms, which meant she saw the private versions of the guests rather than the performed ones. The man who ordered the same breakfast every day and ate it standing at the window. The woman who stacked her shoes in a perfect line but left everything else in chaos. The elderly guest who kept a framed photograph of someone on his bedside table and sometimes spoke to it when he thought the room was empty. She noted all of it and said nothing. Mincio had befriended her in the second week, appearing at her elbow during a slow afternoon with the easy warmth of someone who was good at being liked. She was. Ruby recognized the skill because she had a version of it herself, though hers came from genuine interest rather than design. For months, Ruby accepted the friendship without examining it too closely, because she was working 11-hour shifts and sending money home and sleeping 7 hours on good nights, and did not have the bandwidth for social archaeology. The staff party was Mincio's idea. The hotel had completed a 3-day corporate event, and the celebration was a club near the river that the younger staff had been planning for 2 weeks. Ruby had planned not to go. She had her reasons. She didn't drink. She didn't dance. She was going to be back on shift at 7 in the morning, and the thought of a loud room full of people she saw every day anyway held very limited appeal. "You never come to anything," Mincio told her, appearing at her locker while Ruby was changing her shoes at the end of her shift. "People notice." "Let them notice," Ruby said. "They'll think you're antisocial." "I am a little antisocial." "Ruby." Mincio sat down on the bench and looked at her with an expression of such genuine earnestness that Ruby, examining it later, still could not find the fault line. "Just come for 1 hour. Have a drink. Let people see you outside this building. You work so hard and nobody sees anything except the work. Come and let them see the rest of you." Ruby had looked at her for a moment. She had gone. Hajun had arrived at the same club for different reasons and with a different kind of weight. He had spent the previous 4 hours in a room with men who owed him a significant arrangement from 6 months prior and who had arrived at the meeting with the energy of people who believed that time. An inconvenience eventually eroded obligation. It was a calculation he encountered periodically, and it always told him the same thing about the person making it. They had mistaken his patience for weakness, which meant they had not been paying attention, which meant the relationship had a limited future. The meeting had ended without resolution, which was its own kind of resolution. He came to the club because Du Kayam suggested it, and he didn't have a reason to refuse, and the idea of returning to his apartment and sitting with his own silence was, that particular night, unappealing. He sat in the private section, which the club maintained for people who could afford privacy, and he ordered 1 drink and then a second and then, because the evening already felt like a deviation from his ordinary control, a third. He did not remember the woman clearly afterward. He had gone over the fragments 100 times in the weeks and months and eventually years that followed, and they never assembled into anything complete. A laugh that cut through the music and landed with unusual clarity. The smell of something simple and clean. A conversation he could not reconstruct that had felt, in whatever state he was in, more real than most conversations he had sober. He woke in a room that was not his with a skull full of consequences and a bedside table that held a silver necklace that had not been there when he arrived. He picked it up. He sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, holding it, trying to locate the shape of the night, and finding only edges. The space beside him was warm but empty. Whoever she had been, she was gone, and she had left without. He checked, without taking anything that appeared to belong to him, which meant the necklace was not left as a message. It was left by accident, by someone who had left in a hurry. He put it in his jacket pocket. He told himself he would find a way to return it. He did not examine the fact that he made no effort to do so. He moved it from jacket to jacket over the following weeks, always meaning to address it, always leaving it where it was. 1 year later, it was still with him, sitting in the small interior pocket of whatever he was wearing. So habitual, he had stopped noticing it the way you stop noticing a scar. Until the woman on the pavement in the rain, with 2 infants against her body and a silver chain at her neck that struck him like a key turning in a lock he hadn't known was there. The safe house was in a residential neighborhood that looked ordinary from the outside and was not ordinary in any other respect. The staff were discreet, the perimeter was managed without visibility, and the interior was the kind of comfortable that came from actual thought rather than expense alone. There was a proper room for the twins, which told Ruby that someone had prepared it, which told her that Hajun had made the call before she woke up, which she filed under things to think about when she wasn't holding herself upright by concentration alone. She had resisted the transfer from the hospital. She had sat up in the bed with 2 infants and a drainage tube and listed her objections with precision. She had a job. She had a childminder arrangement. She had a routine that the twins depended on. She was not a woman who relocated into the residences of men she did not know, and she wanted to go home. Hajun had listened to all of it without interrupting. Then he said, "Someone gave them your schedule. The shooting was not random. You don't know that. My people found the vehicle within 2 hours. It was registered to a courier company connected to an organization that has been watching the hotel for a different reason. You walked into a line of sight without knowing you were in one." He looked at her steadily. "They may not know what you saw or didn't see, but they know your face and your route, and that you are a variable they haven't accounted for. Until I close that line, your apartment is not safe." Ruby looked at her twins in their hospital observation cot. Jin was asleep. Miran was awake and staring at the ceiling with the focused, philosophical expression she had worn since the day she was born. "How long?" Ruby said. "I don't know yet. I will tell you when I do. I need to contact my childminder and my supervisor. Du Kayam will handle that." "I will handle it," she said flatly. "Du Kayam can give me a phone." A pause. Something in Hajun's expression shifted, barely, in a way she was beginning to read as the equivalent of a nod from a man who didn't nod. "He'll bring you one this evening. And I need my things from my apartment. The twins' things specifically. There's a bag under the crib with their supplies, and I need all of it. It will be there when you arrive." She looked at him for a long moment. "You've already decided I'm going." "I've decided it's the safest option. You're deciding whether to agree." "That's a very careful distinction." "I'm a careful person," he said. Ruby looked at Miran. Miran looked at the ceiling. Ruby made the decision that the circumstances had largely made for her and hated that she had to. "Fine," she said. "But I want it clear between us. I am not in your care. I am in a safer location temporarily." "Understood. And when you have the information you need, I go home." "Yes." "Immediately." "Immediately," he agreed. The twins were 3 months old, and they did not understand safe houses or gunshot wounds or the complex landscape of obligation and danger they had been born into. What they understood was feeding schedules and the smell of Ruby and the temperature at which a room needed to be, and they made their requirements known with the democratic authority of people who have not yet learned to manage the inconvenience they cause. Jin woke at 2 in the morning on the first night in a state of categorical grievance that he expressed at full volume. Ruby was already awake. She was never fully asleep, hadn't been since they were born, some part of her staying near the surface where she could hear them, and she was out of bed and across the room before he'd finished his second breath. "Shoo," she said, lifting him. "Shoo, I have you. I know. I know it's a strange place. I know." She carried him to the chair by the window and settled him to feed, and sat in the dark of Hajun's safe house listening to the buildings settle around her. Somewhere in the house, there were people awake. She could feel it in the quality of the silence. Not the silence of sleep, but the silence of controlled wakefulness. She heard footsteps in the corridor. They stopped outside the room's door. Did not knock. After a moment, they continued. In the morning, she found a thermos of hot water and a tin of the specific herbal tea she had mentioned in passing to Du Kayam the day before, left on the table outside her door. She looked at it for a moment. She brought it inside. Hajun came to the safe house on the second afternoon and found the sitting room temporarily converted into what he could only describe as a field operations center for infant management. There were 2 padded mats on the floor, a pile of small soft items he didn't have names for, and Ruby seated cross-legged in the middle of it with Miran on her lap, doing whatever it was you did with a 3-month-old's legs that made them kick with what appeared to be satisfaction. He stood in the doorway. "Come in or don't," Ruby said, without looking up. "But standing there makes people nervous." He came in. He sat in the chair across from her, which felt slightly absurd given that the chair was adult-sized and formal, and there was a rubber giraffe on the floor 6 inches from his foot. "Jin," he said. "Asleep. He was awake for 4 hours last night. He's making up for it." "For hours?" "He has opinions about nighttime," Ruby said. "He's been having them since birth. We're in negotiations." She looked up from Miran for the first time. "Your doctor came this morning." "I know. He said Miran's lungs are clear. That the rain exposure didn't cause any damage." "Good. He was very thorough," Ruby said. "He checked both of them twice." She looked at Hajun steadily. "Thank you for sending him." "It wasn't," Hajun stopped. "It was," Ruby said. "And I'm saying thank you. Let me say it." He looked at her for a moment. "You're welcome." Miran, who had been conducting her own agenda through this exchange, chose that moment to turn her head and locate Hajun with the slow, deliberate focus that she applied to new subjects. She looked at him the way a researcher looks at a specimen. Interested, unhurried, drawing no conclusions yet. Hajun looked back at her. Ruby watched this. She watched Miran's expression do the thing it did when she had decided something. A small settling, a quality of resolution. And then Miran looked back at Ruby as though to say, "I have assessed the situation. I am satisfied." Ruby looked at Hajun's face while he was still looking at Miran, and she found something there she had not expected. Not the controlled blankness he wore in most directions. Something unguarded. Something that looked, briefly, like a man who had just encountered something he didn't have a category for and was uncertain whether to be afraid of it. She looked away. She found him in the kitchen that evening, which surprised her, because she had placed him as the kind of man whose domestic life was managed by other people on his behalf. He was standing at the counter with a glass of water, not doing anything in particular, just standing there the way people stand when they've stepped away from something without deciding where they're stepping toward. He looked at her when she came in. "Can't sleep," Ruby said. She was carrying Miran, who had been resistantly awake since 8 and had finally, 40 minutes ago, surrendered to unconsciousness while being walked around the sitting room. Ruby was still carrying her because she knew that the moment she put her down, Miran's eyes would open. "She's asleep now," Hajun said, looking at Miran. "She'll know if I stop moving. She has sensors." His expression did the thing again. Not quite a smile, but in the neighborhood. "Sit down," he said. "I'll walk her." Ruby looked at him. "I've carried her before," he said. Which was true. He had, from the pavement to the vehicle, and Miran had not protested. She handed him the baby. She sat down at the kitchen table and put her face in her hands for 30 seconds, which she allowed herself. And then she looked up and found Hajun standing in the middle of the kitchen with Miran against his chest, one large hand spread across her small back, walking a slow circuit the way Ruby had showed him without showing him. He had simply watched her do it for 2 days and done the same thing. Miran's eyes stayed closed. "She likes pressure on her back," Ruby said. "I know," Hajun said. "I noticed." Ruby looked at him walking her daughter across the kitchen floor at 11 at night in his own safe house, like it was a perfectly ordinary thing, and felt something move in her chest that she was not prepared to examine. "Hajun," she said. He looked at her. "The night at the club 1 year ago," she said. "You were there." The room changed. He stopped walking. Not abruptly. Carefully, The way he did everything. The kind of careful that was itself a form of control. He looked at her with an expression she couldn't read clearly, but she felt the quality of his attention shift into something more absolute. You remember, he said. Pieces, she said. Not everything. But enough. She kept her eyes on his face. Do you? Not enough, he said, and his voice was very quiet. I've tried. I left in the morning, Ruby said. I left because I was frightened and I didn't fully understand what had happened and she stopped. Straightened. I left my necklace. The silence was thorough. It's been in my pocket for 1 year, he said. I know. You looked at it the first night. On the road. I didn't know why I recognized it. Yes, you did, Ruby said. You said it was familiar. You knew why it was familiar. You just didn't have a face to attach it to. He looked at her. And now? Now you do. He stood in the middle of the kitchen with her sleeping daughter against his chest, and the full weight of what 1 year had contained settling over both of them. And he said, What happened after you left? Ruby looked at the table. She looked at her hands on the table, the same hands that had been pressed to the road in the rain 3 nights ago, the same hands that had been the first to hold Jin and Miran 8 weeks before their due date when they arrived ahead of schedule because they were, both of them, people who moved on their own timeline. I found out I was pregnant, she said, and I made a decision. Hajun did not say anything. I decided not to look for you, she said. I didn't know your name. I barely had your face. I was in a foreign country with a work visa and no safety net, and I wasn't going to walk into the life of a stranger and make a claim I had no way to sustain. She looked up at him. I'm not saying that was the right decision for everyone. I'm saying it was the right decision for me. You raised them alone, Hajun said. For 3 months. For the pregnancy before that. Yes. While working. Yes. With he stopped. No, Ruby said. With nothing and nobody except myself. Miran stirred slightly against his chest, and he adjusted his hand on her back. Automatic. And she settled again. And he stood there holding the proof of 1 year Ruby had carried alone, and his face was doing something she had never seen it do. It was losing its structure. Not collapsing. Just releasing. Like something held under pressure finally allowed to exist in its natural shape. You should have been able to find me, he said. Quietly. Not accusation. Something rougher than that. Maybe, Ruby said. But I wasn't going to beg. No, you weren't. And I need you to know that I'm not telling you this because I need something from you. I'm telling you because you deserve to know, and because your doctor was going to run a blood test on Jian in the morning, and I wasn't going to let a test tell you something I should have told you myself. Hajun looked at Miran's sleeping face. He looked at her the way he had looked at her that first afternoon. That searching, uncertain quality. And then he looked at Ruby. Both of them, he said. Both of them, Ruby confirmed. If you made it this far, drop a comment right now and tell me what moment broke you. This story is just getting started and the best chapters are still coming. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs a good story tonight. Don't leave without doing that. I'll see you in the comments. Du Kayam did not ask questions. He was the kind of man who dealt in information with the same discipline a surgeon dealt in instruments. Nothing unnecessary, nothing imprecise, everything in its proper place. He had known Hajun for 9 years, had been beside him through decisions that most people in his world would not have survived, and he had learned to read him the way you read weather. Not from what was visible, but from the quality of the air. Hajun had come to the kitchen where Du Kayam was reviewing the security report for the following day, and sat down across from him with the specific stillness that meant something had relocated inside him. Du Kayam waited. The twins, Hajun said. Yes, Du Kayam said. Hajun looked at him. I noticed Jin's jaw on the second day, Du Kayam said. Miran's is more apparent when she's thinking. You didn't say anything. It wasn't my information to present, Du Kayam said. And you didn't ask. I'm asking now. Du Kayam set down the report. She raised them without any external support. Went back to work at 2 months. Sends money home to her family in Ghana every month without fail. Has never, in 3 years, mentioned a father to any co-worker, including Mincio. He paused. She protected them on that road with her own body while injured. She has not, once since arriving here, behaved like a woman who wants anything from you. Hajun was quiet for a moment. That's an assessment. You asked. I asked what you noticed. I noticed all of it, Du Kayam said simply. Hajun picked up the security report and looked at it without reading it. What do we have on the shooter? Vehicle traced to a front company connected to Park Sung-il's logistics network. Park operates north of the city, competes with your transport arrangement through the Gumi corridor. He had a private guest at the Grand Lux 8 days before the shooting. Suite 1408. Small meeting, 3 people, documents on the table. A pause. Ruby Jackson delivered room service to that suite at 9:43 that evening. She was in the room for under 4 minutes. She wouldn't have understood what she was looking at. Park wouldn't know that. No, Du Kyam said. He'd know a hotel employee had access to the room and no contract of silence with anyone, which makes her a theoretical liability. And someone at the hotel told him her schedule. Du Kyam's expression did not change. We have a short list of 3 staff members with access to shift schedules. Min Seo Kwan is on it. Hajun put the report down. He said nothing for a moment, and in the silence Du Kyam heard the quality of what he was managing, not just anger, which was simple, but something that required more specific handling. She doesn't know yet, Hajun said. About Ruby. No. Give me 2 days. We may not have 2 days before Min Seo does something to protect herself, Du Kyam said carefully. One day, Hajun said. I'll tell her tomorrow. He told her over breakfast. The twins were on their mats in the sitting room off the kitchen. Ruby was eating with the efficiency of a woman who ate when she could, not when she was hungry, because hunger had long since stopped being the relevant variable. She had learned to take 15 minutes and use them. He sat down across from her and put Du Kyam's report on the table and let her read it. She read it twice, methodically, without any visible change in her expression. Then she put it down. The guest in suite 1408, she said. You didn't do anything wrong, Hajun said. You delivered room service. You saw men at a table with papers. You couldn't have known. I know I didn't do anything wrong, she said. Not sharply, just factually. I'm thinking about what I remember from that room. He waited. There were 3 men. 2 I'd never seen before. One I'd seen in the lobby. He'd asked me once about the restaurant hours. Ordinary. She looked at the table. There were papers, but I didn't look at them. You don't look at guest things. There was a laptop open. I put the tray down. One of them signed. I left. She looked up. I wouldn't have been able to give anyone useful information. Park may not have calculated it that way. No, she said. Scared men don't usually calculate accurately. He looked at her. Min Seo gave them your schedule. Ruby looked at the table. He watched her absorb it. She did not cry. She did not say anything immediately. She sat with it the way she appeared to sit with all difficult information, not pushing it away, not performing composure, just allowing it to be true while she figured out what it meant. She didn't know the twins would be with you, Hajun said. Du Kyam confirmed that. She gave the route. She didn't specify. That doesn't make her less responsible for what happened, Ruby said. No, it doesn't. She watched me come to work every day for 1 year, Ruby said. Her voice was even. Absolutely even. She watched me figure out childcare. She watched me come in exhausted and still do my job. She knew I was alone. A pause. She still did it. She wanted money, Hajun said. And she resented you. Both things were true at the same time. I know. She looked at him. I think I always knew the second part. I just didn't think it would become dangerous. What do you want to happen to her? Ruby looked at him for a moment. It was not a rhetorical question, and they both knew it. I don't want her hurt, Ruby said. I want her to understand the full weight of what she was part of. What it almost cost. She looked at the twins through the doorway, Jian on his mat, Miran lifting her head with the specific concentration of a baby practicing neck strength. And I don't ever want to share professional space with her again. Done, Hajun said. Just like that. Just like that. Ruby looked at him. I'm not asking you to do it for me. I know, he said. I'm doing it because it needs to be done, and because your children are mine, and she put all 3 of you on a road in the rain in front of a gun. He said it with complete quiet. No performance. No threat in his voice because the decision was already made, and made men don't need to threaten. That's not a favor. That's a response. Ruby looked at him for a long moment. Okay, she said. Chaun Seo arrived at Hajun's primary office 3 days later. Ruby did not meet her. She didn't need to. Du Kyam gave her a concise account of the visit afterward, not because she'd asked, but because he appeared to have decided, over the course of the previous week, that keeping Ruby informed was a reasonable operational approach. She advised him to separate personal complications from business exposure, Du Kyam said. He said it with the neutrality of a man reading a weather report. She used that word, Ruby said. Complications. She said your presence made him predictable. She's not wrong, Ruby said. Du Kayam looked at her. He is more predictable now, Ruby said. In specific ways. That's true. The question is whether predictability is the same thing as weakness. She looked at the twins. Knowing exactly what you'll protect and exactly what you won't, that's not weakness. That's clarity. That's what he told her, Du Kayam said. And something in his expression told her it was not coincidence that their answers had been the same. The second attack came on a Sunday night. Ruby heard the door alarm, the two-tone sequence, not the bell, and was in motion before the sound finished. She was in the twins' room in 11 seconds, and the wardrobe was between them and the window in 6 more, and she had both infants against her body and the window latch assessed, and the distance to the garden wall measured with her eyes before she heard the first footsteps in the corridor. Jian understood silence. He had learned it over 3 months of Ruby pressing her finger gently to her lips in the low light, and he had somehow, with the seriousness he applied to everything she taught him, understood that this was important. He was quiet. Miran watched the door. Ruby watched the window. There were 2 people in the garden. She had counted footsteps. The window was an option, but not a clean one, and she stood in the dark doing the calculation, and then she heard Hajun's voice in the corridor. One word, flat, final, and then sounds she didn't need to interpret, and then silence. The door opened. Du Kayam. Hands open, no urgency. Clear. Ruby exhaled once. Then she picked up Jian and took Miran's hand and walked out. Hajun was in the corridor. There was a cut on his jaw and something on his sleeve that she didn't look at directly, and he was looking at her with that absolute attention that she had fully learned to read by now. I had the window measured, she said. I was going to take them through it if I needed to. I know, he said. I heard the latch. We need to talk about the garden coverage gap on the east side. He looked at her for a moment. Du Kayam will fix it tonight. Good. She looked at the cut on his jaw. That needs cleaning. It's fine. It needs cleaning, she said again, and went to the kitchen. He followed. She cleaned it with the supplies from the cabinet under the sink, which she had located on day 1 because she always located medical supplies, and he sat still for it in the way he was still for everything. And the twins were on the kitchen floor on their mat, and Miran was watching the ceiling, and Jian was watching Hajun with the focused curiosity that was his primary mode. You're going to need to secure the east garden wall, Ruby said, and add a second person on night rotation. What you had wasn't enough. Agreed. You should have had it already. Yes, he said. Simply. She secured the last piece of gauze and stepped back and looked at him. He looked at her. The kitchen was quiet except for the sound of Miran, who had apparently found something interesting on the ceiling and was conducting a monologue about it. What happens now, Ruby said. Not to the attack. To everything. Park Sung-il is being addressed, Hajun said. The network he was using to access your information has been closed. The threat to you specifically is finished. You're sure? Yes. She looked at him. And Minseo. She gave a full account. She is no longer in Daegu. She will not come back. Ruby absorbed this. She was scared, she said. Not defense of her. Just accuracy. Yes. Doesn't change what she did. No, Hajun said. But it changes what she is. Ruby looked at him for a moment, because that was more precise than she had expected, and it was exactly right, and she was still surprised, sometimes, by his exactness. You could go home, he said. The way he said it told her what it cost him. I know, she said. You should. You said you wanted your life back. I do want my life back. She looked at Jian on the floor, who had decided that Hajun was definitively interesting and was now performing a series of small movements designed to attract his attention. I also want to figure out what this is. This, Hajun said. You and my children, Ruby said. You and me, if that's a thing we're going to be honest about. What it looks like going forward. He was quiet for a moment. What do you want it to look like? I want you to know them, she said. Not as an obligation. Not as a consequence. Because they're worth knowing, and because they deserve a father who's actually present, not a title. She met his eyes. I'm not going to disappear and pretend this didn't happen. I don't want you to. And I'm not going to build my life around yours either. I have my own. I know that, he said. I've watched you rebuild it twice in 3 years. She looked at him. You've thought about this. Since the night you told me, he said. I've thought about very little else. What did you decide? He looked at the floor for a moment. At Jian, who had managed to roll himself 6 inches closer to Hajun's foot and was regarding the outcome of this with deep satisfaction. He reached down without appearing to think about it and rested 2 fingers lightly on Jian's outstretched hand, and Jian grabbed them immediately with the emphatic grip of a baby who has located exactly what he wanted. Hajun looked at his hand, wrapped in Jian's fist. "I decided I don't want to be something that happened to you," he said quietly. "I want to be something you chose." Ruby looked at him for a long time. "That's going to take time," she said. "I know. I don't trust easily. I know that too. And I'm not going to be easy about it," she said. "I'm going to be difficult and specific, and I'm going to need you to be reliable in ways that are probably inconvenient." "Ruby," he said. "What?" "I know." She looked at him. At this man who had crouched in the rain for her, and carried her child, and sat on the floor for her daughter, and kept a necklace for 3 years without knowing what it meant, and she thought about what Min Seo had said that night at the club. "Let people see the rest of you." "Okay," she said. "Then we figure it out." Jian still had his fingers. Hajun had stopped trying to take them back. Miran, from the mat, had turned her head and was watching the two of them with the expression she wore when she had already arrived at a conclusion and was simply waiting for the relevant parties to catch up. Ruby looked at her daughter's face. She almost smiled. She went home on a Thursday morning. She packed the twins' things with her usual precision, organized what had come from her apartment back into the order it belonged, and checked the room twice. Hajun was at the door when she came out with Jian on her hip and Miran's bag over her shoulder. Du Kayam was outside with the car. "Mira knows you're coming back next week," Hajun said. "She rearranged your shifts." "You spoke to Mira." Du Kayam did. "At your instruction, from 2 days ago." He looked at her. She said, and I'm quoting, that it was about time. Ruby did not hide the smile this time. "I'll call you tonight," she said. "After their 7 o'clock feeding. We can talk about the weekend." "Okay. And I want a proper schedule. Nothing improvised. The twins need consistency, and I need to be able to plan. I'll send something through Du Kayam." "Send it to me directly," she said. "I'm the one scheduling." "Directly," he said. She looked at him once more. This careful, controlled, complicated man who had just been handed 3 people's lives and was holding them with more precision than she had expected. And then she walked to the car and got in, and Du Kayam pulled out of the safe house and drove her home. She did not look back at the building. She was looking forward. That was enough for now. It was enough to have her children safe and her life intact and a future that had more shape to it than it had held in 3 years. She did not need to name everything yet. She did not need to know how all of it would land. She needed to get home and make rice and put her children in their crib in their room and stand in her own apartment in the specific silence of a space that was hers and begin again. She was good at beginning again. That is the end of today's story. If you stayed until the last word, you already know this one hit differently. Go down to the comments right now and tell me which scene broke you open. Was it the kitchen? The necklace? The moment he stopped trying to take his fingers back from Jian? I want to know. Like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with someone who needs a story with some real weight to it tonight. Every comment, every like, every share tells me to keep going. I will see you in the next one.